Good evening. Yes. Welcome to the Spring Warrant Review Meeting. I'm Martha Hanner, Local Action Chair for the Amherst League of Women Voters. The League has organized tonight's meeting in conjunction with the Town Meeting Coordinating Committee in order to give town meeting members an opportunity to be acquainted with the warrant articles that will come before town meeting when it convenes on May 6th. The League works to encourage informed voting at all levels, including local government. To that end, we publish Your Amherst Government and the Town Meeting Handbook. Both of these are available at the library and also on the League's website, www.lwvamherst.org. We also prepare They Represent You, a contact list of all town meeting members and all local officials. And to finance these publications, we will be holding our annual book sale on the Common the first weekend in May, May 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Quality books at bargain prices, and so we urge all of you to come and bring your friends and help support the work that we do. We want to thank Amherst Media for televising this event tonight, and it will be shown and again several times thereafter. And so to those of you who are watching from home, welcome. To those of you who are here in the audience, please check that your cell phones are turned off. Okay. Now I would like to introduce Peggy Roberts, who is the chair of the Town Meeting Coordinating Committee, and she will describe the procedure that we'll follow for tonight's meeting. Thank you.
The Town Meeting Coordinating Committee is a committee elected by town meeting to make town meeting work as well as we can make it work as the legislative body for the town. Because information is very important in making informed votes, our committee really spends most of our time trying to get information out and to help people understand how town meeting works and what the articles are about. The warrant meeting tonight really can only introduce you to the articles. There are 45 articles on this long warrant. So we've got a lot to do between now and May 6th to be sure everybody has information and you're all prepared for town meeting. This meeting tonight is not a time for advocacy and debate. It's really just introducing articles, getting out information about what they are trying to do. We've tried to plan the agenda with enough time for summaries of articles, followed by a little bit of time for questions. There's not a lot, but there'll be a few. Some articles have required really more explaining, and so we've given those a little more time. We have grouped together articles in two cases where several articles had something to do with an issue or issues that were related. So for those presentations, the questions will come after the whole group has presented. Martha Hanner is going to be running the timing for the meeting. This is the same timer we use for town meeting. And when the red light goes on, the presenters are supposed to come to the end of their presentation, because if anyone goes over much, we're going to be here later than we should be. Now, Melissa Perot, a member of TMCC, will introduce the presenters, and Mary Streeter, also of TMCC, will be handling questions that follow the presentations. Oh, and Nani Burak is going to be bringing the microphone to you for questions, so always wait for the microphone. We're having a tough time here. Oh, so can we ask
KCTV to turn up the microphones, maybe?
Is it a matter of how close you are? Is that any better? No.
She was just saying that maybe the microphones aren't meant for us, but for Amherst TV.
Yeah.
In this,
I think they're supposed to do both.
If we project, I'll bet we can be heard.
I will do my best. The review of the warrant articles will start with Andrew Steinberg, Chair of the Finance Committee, and he will set the pace for the evening with 10 articles in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And I would first like to thank Town Meeting Coordinating Committee and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring tonight's event and all that they do to inform us about town meeting. Finance Committee has several important responsibilities. We meet throughout the year to really understand on behalf of town meeting the financial circumstances of the town, and so that we can make informed recommendations to you and propose a budget that is a responsible budget that meets the entire financial needs and financial realities for the town, and to make recommendations on other budget or other warrant articles that have a financial consequence. In a few days, you'll be receiving the Finance Committee report, which is going to be quite long this year, commensurate with the warrant, though it does repeat all but one of the warrant articles, which is part of its length. So it is about 90 pages long. I want to encourage you, as you're trying to get into understanding the budget and the consequences of the budget, to pay attention to pages 5 through 13, which are a summary of the income and expenses and the financial policies of the budget development process, so that you can understand the context of the budget as you consider the budget itself, because the budget is one of the most important things that town meeting does each year as the legislative body for the town. The budget is that we're going to be adopting is FY14, which covers the year beginning on July 1st. The year that ends June 30th is the budget that was adopted last year at the annual town meeting, and is the FY13 budget. The first article that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to actually spend more time in proportion on this than on anything else, is Article 12. Article 12 has to do with amendments to the fiscal year 13 budget, the budget for the year we're in that ends on June 30th. There are 4 amendments that will be proposed to this year's budget. I'm only going to discuss 2 of them. When you get look at the warrant and you see the Finance Committee report, you'll see the explanation of all of them. The parts that I'm going to talk about are motions B and C, and they relate, both of them, to what is known as the OPEB trust. And there is a section in that part that I talked about that explains the OPEB trust more fully than we've explained in other Finance Committee reports. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, and that other means other than pension, and what it really amounts to is health care. And what has happened over the years is that the town has had agreements with its employees where it's promised to pay health insurance, as most employers do, not just during the time that they're employed, but also after they retire and up until they're eligible for Medicare. The problem is that, unlike pensions, which I'll mention in a moment in relation to a different article, money was not set aside on an ongoing basis as the people were being paid for the work that they did, and we were accruing a larger and larger liability. For people who retired many years ago, we just pay as we went. We would budget a certain amount each year for the amount of the retiree health obligations. But as we're facing the reality that baby boomer generation, of which I'm a part, is retiring, we're getting to the point where we have this large obligation, and we've had an actuary who has calculated the size of that obligation for the town is now about $94 million. And so what we did several years ago at town meeting was to establish a trust, which is called the OPEB Trust for other post-employment benefits. But we didn't do anything to fund the trust initially. We have now begun in dribs and drabs to try and find money to put into the trust, and we're going to have to, over the years, think of a more concerted way to do it. So motions B and C have to do with funding the OPEB trust. And motion B has to do with what's called a health insurance holiday. And it sounds great, except it's not really a holiday. It's just a month in which, instead of paying health insurance premiums, because we have a self-insurance plan that has been quite well run, and it turns out that this year we don't have to put in 12 months worth of premiums in order to have enough money within that fund to pay the health insurance needs of our employees. And because of that, there's 1 month, which is the month that we're in, where the town is not putting the money that it had set aside into the health insurance fund and is not collecting anything from employees for their share. And what we're going to be proposing under motion B is to take that money that would have gone to the to pay current health insurance and put it into the retiree health insurance fund by putting it into the trust. So that's what motion B is about. Motion C is something similar to what we did in prior years, but a little bit different. Medicare pays for some drug benefits for some people under exceptional circumstances, and when the town pays for that through its self-insurance plan that covers both current employees and retirees, the Medicare reimburses the town for those funds, for that money. And what we're proposing this year is to take that money, all of which comes to the town, and to take the portion that is the Amherst portion, and that is reimbursements attributable to employees of the town of Amherst, and put it into our OPEB trust. Because the health insurance plan that we run also covers employees of the regional school district, which is a separate entity from the town, and covers the town of Pelham, we will also be proposing to to return the Medicare reimbursement monies for Pelham and the region to those two entities. So that is what motions B and C are within the Article 12. The rest of the articles that I'm going to talk about are the FY14 budget, and there are a series of articles that relate to the budget and that are cumulatively total the entire budget, and a series of motions. The big budget, Article 16, will in fact have 13 motions. So I'm going to just real quickly go through what they are, what the motions are, but I'm not going to go into details about the budget. That's all set forth in the Finance Committee report, which you'll be receiving in a few days. So of the budget articles for FY14, Article 13 is for the retirement assessment. And I said I would come back to talking about pension. this is where I'm going to just mention pension. We provide our pension for our employees for the town library and for non-teaching employees through the Hampshire County Retirement System, which is a grouping of towns that get together to run one combined pension fund. And unlike the OPEB trust, which I describe as being largely unfunded, fortunately, years ago, the Hampshire County Retirement System started setting itself up so that it is actually funded and money has been set aside, and we're actually at a point where we can look to the horizon and predict a date and know a date in which it will be fully funded, but it's well on its way. There's an annual retirement assessment, which is our obligation to pay into the fund so that it covers the employees of Amherst, and that's a bill that's due, and we have to pay it each year, and that's Article 13. Article 14 is the regional lockup assessment. Again, it's a bill that is due. We get together with a number of other towns and with the university and share in having a lockup, which is part of the, in Northampton, where the House of Corrections is located. And if the police arrest someone and they need to be held overnight, it's not very cost effective to have a facility at our own police station and have to have the facility and the personnel to cover it. It's better to share it on a county-wide basis, much, much less expensive, and it is paid for by an assessment each year, and that assessment is Article 13. Article 14, Article 14. Article 15, which is the third thing that relates to the budget, is the regional school assessment method. And the regional schools are the schools that provide education at the middle school and high school. It is a region because it is a separate entity. It is composed of Amherst, Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury. Each town has an assessment that we have to pay for the school, for the regional schools. The methodology for how that is divided amongst the 4 towns has to be approved each year by each of the town meetings, because we've agreed to a method that is different from what's known as the state default method. It's something that works much better. So that's Article 14 is not an actual allocation of money, it's an approval of an assessment methodology. So all of the other items that I'm talking about then, for the rest of the time, 16 covers 13 motions, all of which have to do with various sections of the budget for the municipality, the schools, both regional assessment and the elementary schools, and for the library. And there's a whole process that you will find out about, which has to do with motions, because there is the ability to discuss and have motions to amend on any proposed budgets. But we do remind you that if you propose to spend more money, you also have to help us figure out where the money's going to come from. And that's the big challenge, because we had to come up. The challenge is always finding a budget that balances. The reserve fund, Article 17, is setting aside $100,000 for a reserve fund that can be used later in the year if there's special exceptional circumstances. Article 18 is a revolving fund reauthorization, which is needed in order to be able to administer a joint program between the schools and the town to provide after-school care for students at the 3 elementary schools. And then the last 2 articles on the budget are 27 and 28. And those we always put at the end, because they have to be the place where, if money is needed to come out of reserves or the stabilization fund, which is the other part of reserves. Reserves is free cash and stabilization. And if we're going to take money out of either of those, and we will have to take some out of free cash this year to make the budget balance, those are the motions where that happens, so they have to come at the end. So I'm sorry I've taken up my entire time to get through it, but I have, and I'm...
There's actually 47 seconds for a quick question, if anyone has. 47 seconds.
If not...
No questions? Okay. All right. Melissa?
And I'd like to invite Kay Moran to come, Chair of the Joint Capital Planning Committee, and she has 4 articles, I think.
4 articles, 5 minutes, so I'm better off than Andy was. Capital, these are all about the capital budget. Capital items in the budget are something that has cost more than $5,000 and would last more than 5 years or have longer impact than 5 years. These are all, 4 articles are all recommended by the Joint Capital Planning Committee, which has 2 members each from the Select Board, the School Committee, the Library Trustees, and the Finance Committee. And we meet all winter and hear all the requests and deliberate and sort among them to fit the amount of money we hope we have to spend. The amount that we're recommending this year from taxation is equal to 7% of the tax levy. We've had a long time goal of using 10% of the tax levy every year, but we haven't gotten there. 7% is closer than we've been for a long time. Article 19 appropriates $1,118,900. Oh, I forgot. You got already the report of the Joint Capital Planning Committee, which explains in detail every project that we're recommending. There's also a spreadsheet in the back, many, many colors, and there's a key to the colors to help you figure out how to read it. No, it's in the Joint Capital Planning Committee report. It's this document. It's in the back of that document. Article 19 appropriates $1,118,955 from taxation, from the ambulance fund, and from unspent previous capital appropriations to buy equipment for the town, the schools, and the library. Equipment on this year's list includes police cruisers, cardiac monitors, defibrillators. Those are going to be paid out of the ambulance fund, but can only be used for ambulance-related purchases. School kitchen appliances, major appliances like refrigerators, pickup trucks, computers, and photocopiers. All of the requested equipment is listed and explained in JCPC's report. Article 20 is the capital program for buildings and facilities. This article appropriates $449,500 from taxation and $15,000 from unspent previous capital appropriations for building repairs, renovations, and for facilities. The largest single item on the list is $150,000 to upgrade security at the 3 elementary schools. Complete list, again, is in the report. Article 21 is a debt authorization. This article, which will require a 2/3 majority because it's seeking authorization to borrow, it would authorize borrowing a total of $1,225,000 to fund a pumper truck for the fire department, 3 trucks for the Department of Public Works, and the renovation of the boiler room at Wildwood Elementary School, which should end up saving us as much as $17,000 a year in energy costs. More detail can be found in the report. The money would be borrowed in FY14, next year, and paid back over future years. In February, the town sold nearly $7 million in bonds for capital items and projects previously approved at an overall interest rate of just 1.8%. Since interest rates are at this historically low level and Amherst's excellent credit rating and relatively low levels of debt, borrowing for these new projects makes financial sense. Article 22 is called debt rescission. In 2007, town meeting authorized $80,000 in debt to install a handicapped ramp and other improvements at the East Street School building, which is no longer used by the schools. Those renovations were not done and no debt was issued for the project. In the future, if changes are proposed for the building, there will be a new proposal, a new funding recommendation. Rescinding this debt authorization doesn't add $80,000 back into the town coffers. Since the town never borrowed it in the first place, it just removes the authority to borrow it. And finally, what you don't see here is an article for Chapter 90 for $500,000 for road repairs. That's been a traditional article in the town meeting warrant, but it's not actually necessary because the Chapter 90 funds, which are from the gasoline tax, are a grant to the town, and you do not need town meeting authorization to spend it. So in the interest of eliminating at least one article, I think you're not going to see that article again because it's not necessary.
Any questions about the capital program? We may actually come out early. Good job, Kate.
Now moving to Guilford Mooring, who's going to come and talk to us about the articles to do with water, sewer, roads, all those basics that we need so desperately. Thank you, Wilford.
Good evening. I'm Guilford Mooring, Superintendent of Public Works for the town of Amherst. In your second mailing packet, you're going to get a little booklet like this that explains all this stuff, so it's not in the back. Just to let you know, this was to print these up was about $1,000. They just mail out to everybody, just so you know. It'd be nice if we can go digital. So I'm here to talk about Articles 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Article 7 is a road discontinuance for Eastman Lane. Eastman Lane is a University of Massachusetts road. The university controls it, maintains it, does all the work on it. When the university started doing its actual master plan, it found out that there's an old county layout that was established back when George Washington walked back here and then Franklin for the roadway. The right-of-way and layout was never discontinued and never actually was known to many people, so Eastman Lane is the actual pavement you drive on is not always in the layout that's supposed to be the road. So what we're trying to do is clean up this mess. Everyone thought Eastman Lane was a university road, so we're going to give the easement or the right layout back to the university, and the whole thing will actually be like it never happened, which is what we think anyhow. So that's the article. It's to discontinue the county layout to the university, and that becomes university property. The Council of Government, which actually owned the right-of-way, discontinued it to the town about 4 or 5 months ago. So if we don't give it to the university could ask us to maintain the road, which we really don't want to do. So that's Article 7. Article 8 is a sidewalk project we've proposed for a community development block grant. We're proposing to build a sidewalk on Southeast Street from College Street to Colonial Village Apartments on Southeast Street. This has been on a sidewalk list the Public Works Department has, which actually has a date of 1971 on it. So it's been a long-standing sidewalk project that's been proposed. The project does fall into the category that it can be funded by community development block grant money. So we're proposing the project now. You as a town meeting are authorizing the select board to accept easements, because if we build a sidewalk, we need additional land to do this. So the easements will be on private property, and the town will take those and incorporate it so we can build the sidewalk. And that's what this is asking you to do, to give the town permission to take these easements. When you get your packet in the mail, you'll see the whole plans, and you'll see actually where we're taking the easements. And it's actually sad because some of the easements are very small, but we have to do it to make a sidewalk that meets ADA requirements. That's Article 8. Article 9. Article 9 is granting the town manager permission to grant an easement to WIMCO to put a transformer, above ground transformer, next to the funeral home, Douglas Funeral Home on North Pleasant Street. If you walk on the sidewalk in front of Douglas Funeral Home now, you walk across a vault, an underground vault. There's little grates on the ground. They vibrate a little bit. They make you feel funny. So in there's a transformer under the sidewalk, and that transformer has been shorting out a great deal. So what happens when the transformer shorts out is that Douglas Funeral Home, Miss Saigon, a couple other buildings on the other side of the road, they all lose power. Everybody else has power, but they lose power and have to shut down. So the business owner, Mr. Roberts, went to WIMCO and said, "Fix it, please." And WIMCO said, well, the easiest way to fix it is for us to put in a new transformer above ground so that it doesn't get wet and it doesn't short out. So what they're asking for is to put a transformer vault, which is a green box. It's about 4 by 4 by 2.5 feet tall. There's one behind the visitor center on the town common. That vault will go behind the black box, which is next to the Starbucks. Actually, it's called the Boltwood Walk, which goes beside Starbucks and the Douglas Funeral Home. So we have to have permission from town meeting to give an easement to WIMCO so they can put this green box on the ground and actually solve this electrical problem. So that's what Article 9 is all about. Articles 10 and 11. Once upon a time, someone wanted to improve the intersection at Atkins Corner. And as the fairy tale went along, every fairy tale has an ending. We're going to end the fairy tale this year. So this is the last thing we have to do. Throughout the project of building Atkins Corner, we had to take new right-of-way. We had to take new easements for drainage. We had to take new easements for a sidewalk. And we had to take physical right-of-way for the roadway. Because if you look at it, the road has actually moved quite a ways away from where it used to be. We also have excess right-of-way now because we moved the old road out. The road now is actually, the old road is actually part of a parking lot for Atkins Corner. And it's just a big, I guess you could use it as a basketball court for Mrs. Ives. If Mrs. Ives wanted to play basketball, she could put a basketball court on the other piece. So we actually now have to accept the new right-of-way and make it official town layout and town way. And then we have to give away, because we promised to give away to the property owners the excess. So when you receive your packet in the mail, you'll see it. There's color-coded right-of-way we're taking and right-of-way we're giving away. And that's what those two articles are. And in reality, these are the last time I will talk to you about Atkins Corner at town meeting. I think I've talked about it for 10 years now. But the construction project will end in the end of June, and everything's almost done. And this will be the last thing we have to do is tidy up the paperwork and make sure everything's legal. So those are my articles. 10 and 11 are for Atkins Corner to take right-of-way and to give right-of-way back. Article 9 is to grant the town manager permission to give WIMCO an easement for a power transformer at Douglas Funeral Home. Article 8 is for sidewalk right-of-way for a sidewalk project on Southeast Street. And Article 7 is to discontinue an old right-of-way no one knew about on Eastman Lane. Any questions?
Connie? Oh, that's not.
Okay. Oh.
Otherwise, I
Oh
wouldn't
my-
be trailing this thing.
Yeah, sorry. This is a simple question. You've been referring to Atkins Corner, and a couple years ago, somebody's tried to change it to Atkins Corners, plural, and I like Atkins Corner better. Are we now going back to Atkins Corner, or do we have two different names for this area?
I'm a public works guy. I don't really care. If you want to call it either one, it's all right with me. But that's I've always called it Atkins Corner, so that's what we call it. And if you want to change it, that's up to you, I guess.
Yeah, Guilford, the listing had you mentioning Article 23 also, which is Pine Street, and I didn't know if you wanted to cover it or you want me to cover it, but it's the Pine Street acquisitions right away, or not construction.
I can do that one. So Article 23 is for Pine Street. It's a debt. It's not debt. It's a bonding authorization to borrow $2 million to begin the reconstruction of Pine Street. This is the beginning of the end of the potholes on Pine Street, if people want to call it that. So we need to replace the water line, upgrade the water line, and upgrade the sewer line on Pine Street. It'll be roughly $1 million for water and $1 million for sewer, and it's all coming out of the water and sewer enterprise funds, and it'll be paid back with water and enterprise revenue.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
We have Helen Berg, who's going to speak about the Sunderland Road PVTA bus service, her petition article.
Hi, I'm not used to speaking at a mic. I hope you can hear me. I am a former volunteer at the Amherst Survival Center and am the person that did the statistics that enabled the Survival Center to secure their first $1 million funding for the new facility. I would like to apprise this group that as a person who is a patron, not a client as they often refer to the people that use the Survival Center, that the old Survival Center, which was on a bus route, was ample, and the space involved was similar for the patrons. The new facility contains a lot of extra space for offices for staff members who have very high salaries. It's a nonprofit organization, and there is a lack of transparency. While I was taking the statistics, I did not know that they were intended to secure this funding, and I feel it is my responsibility to make this presentation for a bus, because there used to be a bus every 15 minutes. Many people went there in wheelchairs or on canes. I have limited mobility, and there are about 50 people that have been left behind now. Not only are they suffering privation with food, but they are also suffering from social isolation because there was a community there. Now, what is occurring at this new facility is a community service program in lieu of prison time for offenders. And it's unfortunate. I was stalked by a guy that had a 12-inch bear knife, and I do have a complaint at MCAD as a result. I want to be upfront. I am very upfront, okay? There are also unregistered sex offenders I find in the police blotter. People that have no history, cannot tell you their names, not even their first names. And also white-collar criminals, including one guy that is reported to have embezzled $300,000 from a HUD and was working behind the kitchen.
20 seconds.
Oh, okay. So my petition, I was not apprised of the timeline adequately. In fact, I was discouraged from making my petition, but I would like to read my petition since it's not up on the net yet. And I would like to note that not only Cheryl Zoll, the executive director, signed it, but also the program director, Tracy Levy, who lives in Northampton, as well as Sue Lowry, the doctor who is in charge of the clinic. We, the undersigned people who are Amherst voters, petition the said town of Amherst to provide annual funding of $30,000 to the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority in order to add a spur to the existing PVTA UMass Sunderland South Amherst bus route number 31 to service the new Amherst Survival Center on a regular basis. However, this funding would only include, is based on a statement by town manager Musante that would only include 4 trips per day. Right now, they only have a taxi service that has 4 trips on Tuesday, although they are open 4 days a week, and on Thursday from 11 to 7. So a lot of people cannot access. Okay. The Sunderland bus route, number 31. The taxi service. I encourage people to visit the Amherst Survival Center and take a look at the use there because an entire community of 50 people has been cut out. Now, if it is the intention of this town to get rid of poor people, well, I'm almost done, then that's unfortunate. But I have attempted to work to get a bus for 2 years since I found out about this new facility. And they provided me with a petition that had to support this move, which I did not. And I have been working with people for 2 years attempting to get this in place. John Musante has said that there is no time frame. I'm sorry. Is there any questions?
No, there's no time for questions.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Mary Streeter, Vice Chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee, will tell you about Article 24.
Hello, it sounds like I just have one article. However, I've got 7 minutes and 12 components to the article. So far, I think I'm going to have to talk really fast. There's a PowerPoint that you'll get about 30 seconds per slide here. This spring, the Community Preservation Act Committee recommends to town meeting a variety of projects totaling $602,483. They're listed in Article 24 on pages 6 and 7 of your warrant. And there's more detail in the CPA report to town meeting, which you received in your first mailing. Thank you. There is also a great deal of information on the CPA webpage, which is www.amherstma.gov/CPA, especially if you click on the link on that page that says projects for FY14. The projects are in 4 main categories: affordable housing or community housing, historic preservation, open space, and outdoor recreation, with a small amount set aside for administrative expenses. Next. The first thing the committee recommends is that we pay our bills, referred to in the CPA report as debt service. Our current bill is $164,088 for borrowing related to previous projects voted at past town meetings. On the screen, you can see the amounts we owe this year for the bonding for the town hall masonry projects, repairs, creation of playing fields at the Plumbrook Recreation Area, the purchase of the Hawthorne property, and the rehabilitation of 22 units of affordable housing spread throughout town owned by the Amherst Housing Authority. Next. In the area of community housing, we first have Ann Whalen Apartments. The project would rehabilitate 25 units to upgrade kitchen and bath cabinets and doors and countertops, as well as a sink and electrical upgrades to all 80 units at the Ann Whalen. The CDBG grant, I believe, is going to fund the other kitchen and bathroom improvements that are needed there. The next project under community housing is a new project, Renters Emergency Fund, brought to us by the Family Outreach of Amherst and the Amherst Housing Authority. They asked for seed money, and they're going to do private fundraising to come up with about $50,000 in order to allow people that currently live in Amherst money for first and last month's rent or security deposits or something like that. Under historic preservation, we would like to clean and restore Emily Dickinson's dress, which is housed at the Stronghouse Museum. It will be on display most of the year, but there are times it will have to be put aside because too much light can affect it. They also are asking for funds to continue archiving other artifacts in the museum. So they want storage equipment and a small salary to pay someone to supervise the volunteers that will carry out the archiving. Now, Amherst Media has asked for funds to digitize electronic recordings dating back to the 70s that have some particularly important programs that might have been on the cable channel, as well as town meetings and other civic meetings. They will be available to the public via the internet, so we'll all have access to them for free. Next one is Unitarian Society of Amherst would like to restore their lovely Tiffany window. They've asked for $106,000 to do this. They have done some private fundraising that will cover part of the cost of that. This was done by Louis Comfort Tiffany's studio in 1890. It's a very rare example that combines religious and landscape work. And there's an interesting story behind it, which you'll probably hear more about at town meeting. They want to do 100% restoration. There's dirt in between some of the glazing, and it needs to be re-leaded, and then it'll be put away for about a year while the construction is going on. Then it will be put up there and backlit. The public will have access a few hours every day. Okay, Jones Library. We're back to roof repairs again at Jones Library. Apparently there's still a leak, and so they're asking for $14,000 to fix some of the slates that have caused some problems with near the atrium part. CPA will only pay for repairs on the historic part of the building. Okay. Open space. Each year you may be familiar with Dave Zomek in the Conservation Department requesting funds for surveys and appraisals. When we purchase land or investigate the purchasing of land, we have to do our due diligence, and that's what this money will pay for. Okay. The next project is to purchase approximately 5 acres of land on Southeast Street for $125,000. This is quite a project that has been in the making for about 8 years. And right now we have a collaborative effort from the Kestrel Trust, South Amherst Conservation Area, Department of Conservation and Recreation to restore this, to conserve this land next to the rail trail and Southeast Street. And a couple of lots will be sold off for a private house. The next one is the Brunel property that came to last fall. We didn't get the grant for that, so they're coming back again and asking for the full amount for the property, which is $156,000. And this will be phase 1 of a two-part project. And under recreation, we'd like to recommend that the fencing around the pool be replaced, a water line be repaired, shade structures so that people who are watching their kids swim aren't subjected to too much of the sun's rays, and upgrading of the splintery lifeguard chairs. And then the last thing is administrative expenses. We recommend $2,000. Our dues to the CPA Coalition each year is $1,500, and we also have to pay for a few other administrative expenses. Anyway, any questions? Okay. I didn't leave time to breathe.
Now we'll move on to social services, and Town Manager John Risanti will speak about the history and funding of Article 25, and will be followed by Huiling Greeny, who has a petition article number 45. And then we'll have questions after the two of them.
Great, and thank you very much, and thank you to TMCC for hosting this warrant review. I'm here to talk about Article 25, social services funding, to see if the town will appropriate and transfer $90,000 from free cash for social services eligible activities. This article, Article 25, has been recommended unanimously by the Finance Committee at their meeting on April 11th and by the Select Board at their meeting last evening. This is related to social services funding in the town of Amherst. We've been very fortunate over the past 4 years that Amherst has qualified as one of 10 Massachusetts communities for so-called mini entitlement status. And mini entitlement status, we've been designated by the Department of Housing and Community Development to receive an allocation of CDBG funds due to our community's, quote, high statistical indication of need, poverty rate, and size. As most of you are aware, we received up to $900,000 over the past 4 years. We were notified late in 2012 that the town of Amherst no longer was designated as a mini entitlement status community, which puts at risk some or all of our current annual allocation for the federal fiscal year that begins this coming October. We were told that we would likely receive a maximum of about half of what we received in the current year as one-time transition money. So that puts at risk social services funding and non-social services funding, and this article is related to the social services funding proposals. And the amount of $90,000 is meant to provide a total amount of funding from the town plus what we think we'll get in CDBG in the coming year to basically have an equal amount of money available for the upcoming year as we had in the current year. To develop recommendations on how best to allocate those funding, I've relied on our CDBG Advisory Committee, a citizen committee appointed by the Select Board. They did a series of public hearings latter half of last year into early 2013, updated our community development strategy, and they focused again on some real priorities. Overwhelming need for basic services, sheltering, homelessness, education, job training, food pantries, youth development, and emergency services. Using that strategy, the committee used criteria to review a whole series of requests for funding that came in from many, many agencies. And the criteria the committee used in their recommendations to me that I've endorsed and the Select Board have endorsed were the impact to beneficiaries, feasibility, maximizing budget dollars, and meeting the community development strategy. And to that end, there are a series of prioritized recommendations from which the article monies would be used. The first $90,000 will be CDBG funding to maintain our current funding for the emergency homelessness shelter at First Baptist Church, run successfully now the past 2 winters by Craig's Doors. That will continue to be a CDBG funded activity. The next block of 5 are what would be funded from this article. Flexible emergency funds for the town of Amherst for helping income eligible folks for fuel, transportation, and medical prescription needs. That was $15,000. $25,000 to Big Brothers Big Sisters for a mentoring program for our most at-risk youth in Amherst. $20,000 to Family Outreach of Amherst to fund a caseworker for families in danger of becoming homeless or utilities being shut off. $10,000 to the Survival Center to provide monies for their food pantry for adequate nutrition for low-income residents, and $20,000 for rental assistance for those in need in the community. That's the total of 90, and it's based upon the prioritized recommendations from our CDBG Advisory Committee, and I urge town meeting to support that. Thank you.
Any questions, Claire?
I just had a question. I didn't hear a number for Craig's Doors. I'm sorry.
I think we'll have the questions at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
Good evening. My name is Huilin Greeny. I'm from the Housing for All Citizens Group. Thank the League of Women Voters and the Amherst Town Meeting Coordinating Committee for hosting the event tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here to support the funding for the social service provided by the town for many years. And as you heard from Mr. Musanti, this year, because of the cut in our CDBG funding to only 50% of what it used to be. So therefore, our town is here to offer additional funds to make the social service be fully funded. And we support the funding part, meaning the $90,000 requested from the town meeting floor from the taxpayers' pocket. However, the Housing for All Citizens group feel, given the fact that back in November, the town was fully aware of the fact that the CDBG will be cut in half. So we appeared before the town manager and the select board to ask them to set up a committee or a citizen group like before, where there was no CDBG funding, that can fully vet all the social services that request for funds. Unfortunately, I believe, or we believe as a committee, that the funds requested this year will only be appropriate to altogether 4 additional agencies. So therefore, that suits the CDBG purpose. However, this is town meeting appropriating funds. We are not restricted to only fund 5 agencies, including the Craig's Doors. We believe that the town should also on the lookout for the people who have not been funded. In this case, we are concerned about the immigrants and the people who have no GED, therefore cannot get housing, and the people who are struggling, especially the individuals who have no chance of getting housing in this town. So the housing and stabilization put forth by Amherst Community Connections, of which I happen to be the director. But the funds, we feel, need to be appropriate across the board, not just to fund the first 4 projects, focusing on the purposes that Mr. Musanti alluded to, but we feel there's a great need here for the immigrants, for the people who don't have GED, for the people who just cannot get housing in this town. So we want to urge the town meeting, when we consider funding, we need to look across the board, the whole spectrum of the needs here. And so we want to urge town meeting to consider funding them all. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, but rather on an equity basis. We felt it's necessary to look at the funding and look at the best way to fund the structure for the future year. So this is a chance for us to discuss what's the structure next year when there's no CDBG funding at all. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have 3 minutes for questions. Claire?
Yeah, the funding for Craig's Doors is $90,000, and that would be monies we believe we will get from the CDBG grant that will come forward this year. So they would be essentially level funded from the CDBG in the year, and that was considered by myself, the Select Board, and the CDBG Advisory Committee as the top priority for social service funding.
Janet?
Can you tell us how?
Could you tell us, please, what proportion of Craig's Doors budget that supplies? Do you have that?
I don't have the percentage. There's a substantial amount of fundraising that Craig's Doors needs to do to meet their needs. The $90,000 is a significant contribution, but they have to rely on a lot of private fundraising and untold hours of volunteer hours to make it work.
Thank you. Catherine?
Is there a list of the agencies that are not going to be funded as a result of these cuts?
The basic difference between the 2 articles is how the $90,000 is allocated, and there is a list of, there's some additional agencies that requested funding through the CDBG process that some portion of that $90,000 would be allocated to under Article 45. I believe that will be part of the packets, either in the backup materials in Article 25 and or the petition handout has a list of agencies to be funded.
Carol?
Yeah, I just had a question about when the human resources, not human resources, community, this line item for community services, when it was eliminated, part of the reasoning was, well, we have the CDBG block grants. But now that they are evaporating, is there a plan to put this line item back into the budget so that we can have equitable funding for all the organizations that are so needy?
The article before you is considered a one-year fix. That's a precursor to a longer-term plan, and quite frankly, we don't have one yet. But it's clear priority that we need to do what we can to support social service, particularly on the basic needs category. So that will be work ahead after town meeting, coming up with a longer-term strategy and how best to approach this as a community.
Okay,
More
Jim.
help from Washington would be the preferred option, quite frankly.
A quick question from Jen.
Jim, so a quick follow-up to that, and I apologize if you answered it in the beginning. I just walked in. Why aren't my understanding that was that the reason for treating this as a separate decision was we wouldn't know at the time we were doing the budgets what the status of the CDBG money was. But since it's all happening in the same town meeting, why are we treating it as a separate article and not within the budget? Because it's an appropriation.
Because it's considered a temporary solution. We won't know officially what the outcome is on our CDBG grant application until June. But based on the many discussions we've had with the granting agency, we expect to receive about half of what we got in the prior year. So that was the basis for this. I don't envision a special article every single year. We'll be spending some time thinking about a longer-term solution after this town meeting.
Okay, Wei-Ling or Ellie? I think, I'm not sure who's first.
CDBG funding back.
It's an ongoing effort with the state. They review their formula for how they identify who the mini entitlement communities are, et cetera, every 2 years or so. We are very much at the table offering our feedback, and we went from just barely eligible to just barely not eligible using their current criteria. So we're looking for them to update their criteria. So because we have people in need in our community.
Okay, and the last question on this is from Wei-Ling.
Thank you very much. The question is this, that in the last select board meeting, I recall the rental assistance was not funded. So that was a big concern of the Housing for All Citizens group. But now tonight, it just came to our attention that the $20,000 will be allocated for the rental assistance. Is this part of the article now?
Yes, it is, and it always was, because the article's a total of $90,000. That plus the $90,000 from CDBG for the homeless shelter gets us to a total of $180,000. So that last $20,000 was the next prioritized funding request on the list from the CDBG Advisory Committee. So that the last $20,000 of the $90,000 allows that program to be funded.
Thank you.
Okay.
About Article 26, which is the town gown planning.
Right, and there's only one article related to this issue. Sorry, on the warrant. Article 26 is an article, again, recommended by both the Finance Committee and the Select Board to see if the town will appropriate $30,000 from free cash for a town gown strategic planning study in partnership with the University of Massachusetts. This comes out of a number of discussions that the Chancellor and I have had in recent months about how we can work together to assess really key community development issues, including ways to strengthen neighborhoods and neighborhood boundaries, looking at economic development opportunities, looking at housing options, our public safety needs, et cetera. And you know, we've been quite candid with each other, and quite frankly, we're not big, huge fans of hiring consultants, but we think in this case, using outside facilitator to help further our dialogue between town and gown will be really potentially very fruitful in building upon what we think are the many positive aspects of the relationship, and taking a really good look at some of the challenges that remain, not least of which is some of our neighborhood issues. You know, we're trying to address this on many different fronts, including the article you'll hear about next, rental regulations bylaw. But we think this has a lot of opportunity. If we want to be partners, we want to be partners about how we pay for such an effort. And the basic concept is the university pays for half of this effort and the town pays for the other half. And I thought that was quite reasonable and fair, and was the basis for my recommendation to the Select Board and Finance Committee that they've endorsed. So I hope town meeting can see fit to support this. At my invitation, the Chancellor has agreed to come speak to town meeting on this article, which I think is great, hear directly from the Chancellor. And we're looking forward to that dialogue.
Okay, we have 3 minutes for questions on this article. Janet?
For you new town meeting members, get used to this.
Thank you. If this article should pass, can you tell us how the neighborhood residents would be involved, please?
Sure. There'd be a lot of work at the staff level, but as we flesh out a more detailed scope of services to engage the consultant, we will make sure there is an outreach component to it. So it's not just a few of us in a room talking to a consultant, that there are opportunities to share some preliminary work, get feedback, and have that help inform the discussion. So the details of how that will occur will be fleshed out in the scope of services.
Connie?
My question is, since this is town gown strategic planning, I'm wondering if this article will come before the planning board prior to town meeting so they can make a recommendation on the article?
Be happy to do that. I'll work with staff to make that happen, and clearly the planning board, as we go through this effort, along with the staff, will be engaged and consulted with on this as we move forward.
Carol?
I'm glad to hear that that the fees are being split. So that looks like then this is a $60,000 consultant fee. I'm concerned about the number of consultants that the town is hiring. By a handout we got in town meeting about a year ago, there were about over $500,000 of ongoing studies that had yet to be completed. And I'm just wondering, why $60,000 for a consultant? How does that budget break down? Why not, 10 to 20,000? And have any other communities that have town gown issues hire consultants for 60,000, or how are they approaching it?
The price tag for a study of this type is quite reasonable when you look at similar town gown studies that have been done in other college towns. And depending on where you look, that's even on the low side. 60,000 is a big number. There's no question about it. It's not as big when you have another entity paying half. But to engage a well-qualified consultant and his or her team, you start working out hourly rates, et cetera. You get to 60,000 pretty fast. So that's the basis of the estimate. And I believe we're in the midst of updating our list of where the various studies lie. For example, we have a housing production plan that's a draft out on the webpage that was funded with block grant, and encourage you all to read that. That's one of our bigger studies we've done over the last year or so.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Now we have a group of articles related to the rental property bylaws and requirements. And we'll start with Dave Zomack. our chair of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group, and assistant town manager, and he'll talk about Article 29.
Great, thank you very much. I'll try to be brief to leave time for questions because I know we've got a block of articles here that are related, and I'm sure there's a fair number of questions. I think to start off, Article 29 seeks to amend the Town of Amherst general bylaws by adding the following new bylaw. And I think for all new members of town meeting, seasoned members of town meeting, I think under 1 purposes, A through G clearly outlines the broad purposes of this article. And I'm happy to talk more about those broad purposes or answer questions in a few minutes. I wanted to talk a little bit about the background here as to why the town is pursuing this bylaw. And in the second town meeting packet, which goes out, mailing, which goes out later this week, there will be an extensive group of materials, documents that will give some background on what has been referred to as the Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Working Group. So for many years, Amherst residents have asked the town to exert more control over rental housing. The increasing conversion of single-family homes to rentals and associated changes in Amherst residential neighborhoods made the creation of new regulations an imperative. With this increasing pressure, our town manager, John Musanti, in the fall of 2012, appointed a group of residents, staff, representatives from the university, about 16 strong, to come together to wrestle with this question of what is happening in our neighborhoods with rental properties. And from November 2012 to March 2013, that group held a series of meetings, consecutive Tuesdays, and on a number of nights, public forums to gather input and ideas about rental regulations. We also sought input from other communities around the country with college, what we call college communities. Out of that effort of dozens and dozens of hours of public meeting and hundreds of documents that we gathered, which are all available on our Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group website, on the town main page, town main webpage. Feel free to go seek that information there as you prepare for town meeting. We crafted this bylaw that we recommended to the town manager. I want to read kind of a quick summary of what we believe the bylaw will do, and then move on, and happy to take questions. What will this bylaw do for the town of Amherst? Very quickly, it will require registration of all rental properties so the town knows where they are and who owns and who manages them. This makes it easier to follow up on complaints and concerns. It will clarify for landlords and tenants what the town requires for compliance with existing health and safety codes, occupancy limits, and noise and nuisance bylaws. This will help make sure everyone is on the same page and understands the expectations. It will require an approved parking plan for each rental property. This will make crystal clear what is and what is not legal parking, making it easier for tenants to comply and easier for code officials to enforce. And finally, number 4, it will allow for the potential to suspend a landlord's ability to rent a property due to egregious non-compliance. This gives the town a new tool of last resort and should have a deterrent effect. I want to make it clear that this is a complaints-based system. There is no required inspection. There is a self-inspection, and you probably saw that in the bylaw, and you'll see it in the materials you get for town meeting. It is a very strong registration program where the town will gather the necessary and critical information so we know who is renting these units, how we get in touch with the decision makers in those units, and what our expectations are for the owners, managers, and tenants. So I think I'll stop there and
Any
go
questions?
take questions in a moment.
Actually, questions at the end.
Oh, that's right. Questions will be at the end.
I'm going to ask the petition article people from the Coalition of Amherst Neighborhoods, Steve Bloom and Maureen Adams, to explain Article 38, which is related to this.
I think you've heard from the Coalition of Amherst Neighborhoods. We took that so that we could have the acronym of CAN, as in Yes We Can. This is a large coalition of residents in residential neighborhoods who've been threatened by the rapid acceleration of unregulated, non-owner occupied commercial rental houses throughout Amherst. This statement, by the way, is being given out to you, and this will come out with the mailing, the second mailing. But I thought it might be useful to have this to follow along now. Since this is a petition article, we had to get this completed by March 11th, which was before the town's bylaw was ready. So that there are ways in which ours had to necessarily anticipate the completed work that appears in Article 29. There are many very important agreements between these two articles that I want to emphasize. Both of them offer a rental permit that grants permission, focusing on the landlords who have created the conditions in many cases under which this commercial activity takes place, and the conditions under which nuisance houses in many cases occur. So our focus is not on the larger issue of student behavior. We know that that's an issue. We know that there are other means in our arsenal to take care of that at future town meetings. The focus this time is on the commercial activity of rentals. We share this emphasis with 29, and we're modeling it, as 29 does, on the permit systems used in most college towns, although you need to know that this really is permitting and inspection light. Rather than having mandatory inspections that precede the acquisition of a rental permit, this is a case in which the landlords affirm by signature that the conditions are appropriate and that they have conveyed the key information to their tenants that will lead to, we hope, curbs in student misbehavior. And given that affirmation on the part of the landlords, the inspection is complaint-driven. That is, complaints coming from neighbors or from tenants themselves. I think that that's really the basic point of agreement, and I think Steve will say a few words about 3 areas in which petition Article 38 parts ways from Article 29.
Hello, I'm Steve Bloom. Before I go through those 3 points, I just want to reiterate a couple things. First of all, we're totally in favor of the Shinwig proposal, so this is not in competition. Secondly, I keep reading about how these are harsh measures that are going to be imposed on landlords. As Marianne just mentioned, this is permitting light. We hired a consultant from Newark, Delaware, to help us, and as our research informed us. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'll get back to that. Anyway, here are the 3 different differences. Permit requirements. CAN's Article 38 requires a rental permit only for rental units that are not owner-occupied. In this, it parts company from Article 29, which extends registration and permitting to all town rentals, including owner-occupied houses with 1 or 2 rental units. Research has shown that virtually all nuisance houses are non-owner occupied and virtually none are owner occupied. CAN does not see the need to regulate a large segment of the town's rental stock when it doesn't present a nuisance problem. With Article 38, it is only the non-owner occupied, largely commercial rentals, many owned by limited liability companies, whose investors do not reside in Amherst, that require town permits. Number 2, fees. CAN believes that there is greater parity and fairness in charging a permit fee based on a number of rental dwelling units, the proposal in Article 38, rather than charging a permit fee on the basis of a single property address as described in supplemental materials that accompany Article 29. Why should a small landlord renting to 2 tenants at a single address have to pay the same fee as a large corporation renting to 200 at a single address? Furthermore, CAN's Article 38 explicitly stipulates revenue neutrality as a governing principle to cap fees associated with rental permits. Parking. Unlike Article 29, CAN's Article 38 does not take up the complicated challenges posed by parking. We believe that the town's parking problems should be addressed by a separate town or zoning bylaw. A small town like Amherst lacks the resources and means to police rentals on its own. Currently, too many absentee landlords reap the benefits and rewards of a captive rental market without accepting the commensurate responsibilities. Article 38 simply asks that they assume their fair share. Oh, and now I remember what the last thing I wanted to say. We also keep hearing about how this adds another level of bureaucracy to rentals. And I just want to say there is no bureaucracy right now to rentals. They can pretty much do what they want. And what we're proposing is the minimal that can be proposed. Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One is I know Steve keeps referring to Shinwig, and I think that it's a little bit confusing, but that's the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group. And I think CAN might have coined this Shinwig, but it can be a little confusing. The second thing I wanted to point out is Article 29 does not establish fees. You'll note by reading it closely, it is the select board. If the article passes town meeting, the select board will set any fees, any permit fees, any registration fees for rental properties. So I want to make that clear that although one fee per property has been discussed and considered by the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group and recommended to the town manager, it's not part of this proposal. If this were to pass and be approved by town meeting, the select board would take that up at a future date.
We do want to make clear that this is not a competing article. We want to make it clear that we support 29. What we want most of all is to have a rental permitting system in Amherst. And so 38 remains as a backstop. If 29 passes in its entirety, we don't need 38. If 29 fails or fails in part, we might need parts of 38 and would amend it accordingly.
We'll have questions at the end. There is another person speaking in this.
And I'm going to introduce myself, Melissa Perot, as the petition article about the nuisance house bylaw. This is very short and sweet. Essentially a correction to the nuisance house bylaw that was passed at last town meeting. There was a section that was omitted that was intended to be deleted and was not so indicated in the warrant article. That had to be replaced in order to proceed, and now I'm eliminating again in the proper fashion. It's the few words that say that it is a loophole, that the article, sorry, this is Article 39, the nuisance house bylaw. And in 6A, the last sentence says, the owner of the property shall not be held responsible for any violation or penalties if they are actively trying to evict the offending tenants from the property. And I've asked that that be deleted. I don't think eviction is an appropriate response in this situation, and should not allow the landlords to evade the response costs by simply issuing an eviction notice to a tenant. Hopefully what we can put in place is something that will prevent that situation from occurring and deter students from getting into that situation. It's a nasty thing to have to go through. The other piece that I've asked to be eliminated is the inclusion of the fire and ambulance services providers in the response costs. That's in the definitions part of response costs. So the response costs are only going to be from the law enforcement and not complicated by the fire and emergency response providers. Otherwise, there are a couple of corrections to the language to make it flow easier and be more understandable. Thank you. And finally, Vince O'Connor is going to speak on Articles 40 and 41.
Yes, he is.
Article 40 is rental housing information. My view is that if the town wants, the best way to get housing, the housing stock of the town, to keep it in good shape and so forth, is to inform the people who have the greatest interest in doing that, the tenants, by providing them with information 3 different ways. One, posting on the website the rental, what was equivalent to the landlord-tenant booklet, sending them, and this would be done by August 1st of each year, so that incoming people would be able to find it and go to it and use it to rent. Second, to send a summary of all the town's rental housing regulations out every September. Gradually, we'll educate a whole group of people, and they will be more aware of both their rights and their responsibilities. And then third, to work with the university to try to get that same summary sent out by electronic means to all their students who live in town, who have in-town addresses. On the residential parking, it's pretty straightforward. Rather than singling out rental households, it basically says that no one can park on their lawn, and that it didn't seem like a good idea to have a discriminatory thing, end up in court trying to defend that, and that for rental properties you have to keep track of who has permits, that new and expanded parking would have to go through the zoning bylaw, and that the enforcement provisions from the towns from Article 29 are put in. And this is all to address the issue of the fact that, of parking on the lawn and parking in other inappropriate locations in residential properties. So.
Okay, now we have approximately 15 minutes for questions for any of these presenters. Vince, why don't you step in front? Any questions? Joan.
Thank you. I'm wondering what the process will be for reconciling the petition article and the town's article. For instance, I prefer in the petition article the exclusion of owner-occupied properties from the permit system. So would I, in dealing with that, would I want then to amend, I forget the number of the article, the town's article, to exclude owner-occupied properties? Would that be the proper way to make sure that that becomes a provision should the residential permit bylaw pass, rather than waiting, because it sounds like if that passes, you're going to withdraw the petition. So I'm just not sure what the appropriate process is.
I'm not sure I'm the appropriate person to answer that question. I think it's one perhaps for the moderator. Certainly Article 29 is the article recommended to the town manager and the select board from the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group, which will come before the petition Article 38. I don't know all the procedural, I'm not a procedural expert on town meeting, And I don't think we can advise you or any town meeting member as to what you could or should do, but I think it's a great question for the moderator, unless there's somebody else in the room who might want to.
Additional questions? Oh, okay, go
I'm
ahead.
going to take a quick shot on that before there are other comments. In my view, amendments are always appropriate. And I think the town meeting expresses its will by letting the moderator know that amendments are coming and presenting them to him in writing. And I think we all feel that we will be educated by the discussion of Article 29 and make the best decision we can in the interests of a solid rental permit system in the aftermath of the vote on 29.
Carol?
Just from years in town meeting, it's my understanding that you can amend if it's within the scope. And it's within the scope of the article if it's less than what the article would accomplish, but not more than what the article accomplished. So if you're narrowing the group of people affected by this, I would think it would be within the scope. If you were broadening the group of people affected, it would not be. That's my understanding, but ask the moderator.
Okay, Jim, wait till the mic comes.
So I had a related question that, coming from a slightly different angle, is there continued work by the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Committee with perhaps the petitioners on 39, so that since you both are attempting very similar goals, it seems to me that it would be more effective if those three small differences could be addressed prior to town meeting, so that we could be presented with a single proposal that had broad support from both the committee and the neighborhood group, and could just discuss the pros and cons of a single issue, rather with the more reduced target, with a fee structure that all could agree on, et cetera.
Let me start, and then perhaps a member of CAN can chime in. First of all, Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group has scheduled another meeting for next Tuesday in this very room from 3 to 5 p.m. to prepare for town meeting. These are open meetings. Anyone is welcome to attend. So the working group will assemble here next week on the 30th. I believe that's the 30th Tuesday from 3 to 5 here, to discuss speakers, discuss any new developments, also to discuss the current, the warrant article as it is written. There was some input from town council that occurred since our last meeting that actually ended up in the warrant article. With regard to the three issues, certainly they will be discussed on Tuesday, and I can't speak for the working group, but the working group did vote on the substance of the article. So on the issue of fees, the working group voted to ask the select board to assign those fees, but there was strong support for it to those fees to be associated with a property and not the number of units on that property. On the issue of parking, we wrestled mightily with the parking section and very full and robust discussions on parking, and we feel as though, the group felt as though parking needed to be included in this article. The last issue was the owner-occupied or not. Again, that was a long discussion, and I think it occurred on multiple afternoons in this room with the working group, and after considerable feedback from the public and members of the working group, we decided and voted to include that section as well, and that is addressed in our FAQ. Let me just read you that section. So why does the bylaw require owner-occupied rental properties to register? The feeling is that this is, again, a registration program. It is not requiring inspections of any rentals, except in the case where a complaint has been submitted to the town. So we moved from the concepts used in other college communities, or the other programs used in other college communities that actually have required inspections, to one that is complaints based. So why did we include this? Let me just read you, because this isn't just about preventing too many occupants or messy properties. It's about keeping tenants safe. The registration and self-certification process will help to ensure that all those who rent out space in their homes are aware of and complying with health and safety codes. There are a number of new owners and new managers. There are a number of people who are who own their own house and rent out rooms, and many of them, we feel, are not aware of the safety and health regulations required by the town or by the state. And so in the sense of fairness, we felt it was appropriate to simply ask them to register and self-certify and attest that they are aware of the same things that anyone else who is doing this commercially would need to do. So we don't feel as though the bar is very high for those owner-occupied units. We feel as though it's important for the town to know who is renting out those rooms, and that they are aware of all the local rules, regulations, and laws, as well as state law. So that was the rationale.
Okay, Vince? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say very briefly that once the articles, the petitions have been submitted, we really can't change them. They are as they went in. So we do have the language that is set for 29 and 38, and I think these are genuine differences of opinion. I think that the larger scope of Article 29 represents the genuine and defensible interest of the town to get a grip on the entire picture of rentals. And I think that the interests of the coalition was to get a rental permit on the places that we describe as commercial activities where we feel the need is greatest. So I think the town meeting is going to need to sort this out.
It's Vince? Sure.
Two questions about all these self-certifications in both articles. They have to do with what I would even call minor civil issues. In other words, the state sanitary code is not a criminal code. And so I wonder what penalties are contemplated by each, by the presenters for Article 29 and 38 for, it says under the pains and penalties of perjury, what are the penalties going to be as you understand them, or are we going to have a town council's letter about that? And who is going to enforce it? And the other question is, how are the demands of particularly 38 consistent with affordable housing? I can point out, if this were the forum to do so, all sorts of issues in the apartment complex where I live, where you could basically force the landlords to do so much work that you would drive everyone out of the complex who is not a student. So.
Okay, I hope we can have fast responses to these questions, because there are at least two other questions that haven't been asked yet.
I think I'll address the first one, since that was Article 29 and Maurianne or Steve. So I feel like the penalty section under Article 29, Section 13A, clearly identifies any potential penalties. At town meeting, we will have Rob Mora, our building commissioner, Julie Fetterman, our health director, and representatives from the Amherst Fire Department who helped develop this with the working group there to answer any more specific questions that people might have. So Section 13 and 14 outline that progressive system, and I think I'll leave it at that.
That doesn't address the perjury issue, just so that it addresses the non-compliance with the codes and so forth, but it doesn't address the perjury issue. Why would you?
It actually says any provisions of this bylaw. So it actually does, it is relevant, it pertains to any non-compliance with the entire bylaw, not just state law or state code. So take a close look at Section 13 and 14, and we'll be happy to answer more questions on the floor of town meeting. I don't feel like this may be the appropriate place to go into that kind of detail. Thank you.
Okay, Marianne, do you have a brief answer?
I wish. I mean, it is not the intention of this Article 38 to drive up the rents in Amherst. I think that that is arguable, and I think that the issue of affordable housing is a very important one to discuss. However, we must get a hand on the overcrowding, noise, nuisance, trash issues that have been part of the enormous benefits that commercial rental enterprises have gained without their meeting their obligations to the larger communities. And I think we'll have plenty of other discussions on town meeting about how we meet our obligations to affordable housing.
Hey, Michael, do you have a question?
I'd like to just say, your argument is that if we impose minimal standards.
No, the argument is that, one, I have a question about the perjury issue, criminalizing a civil matter.
Yeah, I'm not, the perjury question has already been addressed by Dave. I'm just asking you, your argument seems to be that if landlords have to maintain minimal standards, that's a bad thing? No. Because it would drive up, because of the cost of doing minimal repair? No?
I'm concerned that this is not the forum for a debate. Okay, Michael?
So one is a statement and one is a question. The statement is, before I vote on this in town meeting, I would like to have some indication of what the fees could be, even if it's, you know, possibly A, B, or C. Otherwise, I feel like I'm giving just a blanket thing to the select board, and they could say it's $1,000, and I'd think that's crazy, and they could say it's $50, and I'd say it's okay. But to some indication would be appreciated by town meeting. So hopefully someone can get that for us. And the question is this, so I've never heard of any town doing anything like this for the places I've lived. And is this done anywhere else other than college towns?
I can answer that. It's done in Provincetown. I can show you the schedule for that in Provincetown.
To the mic.
I'm sorry. It's done in Provincetown. It's done in sections of Boston. It's done much more rigorously in State College, Pennsylvania. It's done in Newark, Delaware, where the University of Delaware is. It's done at the in Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is. So this is not a radical thing. This is actually a pretty common thing. What's unusual is that in a town with a university the size of UMass, we don't already have it, is what's amazing. In terms of the fee structure, what we were proposing is a $50 fee per dwelling unit. And what could be amended, there could be a sliding scale, which is what Newark has, which would have a cap on large complexes, which we'd be amenable to. What we've just proposed, though, in our proposal is $50 per dwelling unit, which we think is very reasonable.
Just if I could address the fees, the recommendation that came out of the Safe and Healthy Working Group to the town manager was $100 per property. We looked at some of the other programs. We looked at sliding scale. Things get very complicated very quickly with the number of kinds of properties and the number of units we have. So again, we took examples from other places and really said, what would it look like with a flat fee, whether you have 1 unit, 5 units, 20 units, you would be the fee would be $100 per that property. And the reason we need to keep focused on this is the fee is not based on inspections. It's based on what it will cost the town to take in the application, review the application, which will include obviously the application, the self-certification forms, the parking plan, and any follow-up that might be needed on that. And we feel as though that is the same whether it's 3 units or 33 units. It really is the same amount of work. So the recommendation that came to the town manager was really based on that. It's the amount of work it will take to review that application. It is not that we are going to have to go out and inspect 55 units at your property, because frankly we're not going to do that unless a complaint comes in. So it's based on the amount of work. All of this, I will remind everybody, will be coming in electronically. This program will be is envisioned and will be designed to be electronic submittals of all of this information. So we're trying to make it very easy for owners and managers to apply for a permit and get a permit to rent their properties. Thank you.
Okay, I have one last question myself for Dave. My concern is similar to Michael's. I was wondering, would a senior citizen renting out a single room because of financial hardship be expected by the select board to pay the same fee as a corporation owning a large number of units, a couple of hundred units? There seems to be some unfairness inherent in that.
I guess my response is that a recommendation came from the Safe and Healthy Working Group to the town manager. Again, this bylaw does not set the fee. I think the select board, Stephanie O'Keefe, who was very involved and a member of the working group, as well as the town manager, recognized that we want to come up with a system that is fair and equitable and does not create undue hardship or burden for that small that person or small operation, or that larger company that runs one of our larger apartment complexes. So I think there's an acute awareness that we don't want to create a system that is unduly burdensome financially. So I think that's the spirit with which the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods group brought that forth to the town manager. Again, it's not in this proposal, but I appreciate that town meeting will want to know that and send that message to the select board that if they are the fee-setting agency or board, as outlined in the article, that it is not too burdensome. So I hope that provides some guidance. But again, it's about the cost of reviewing the application, and not unlike an application to run a restaurant or have a taxi license. So it's not about the cost of us inspecting 55 units here or 150 units there. It's really one permit that comes in, and you list on it, I have 16 rental units, 6 rental units, 600 rental units, and we will review that parking plan, that self-certification, and all of the materials that are required.
Thank you. If there is extra time at the end, we'll have more questions. But right now we have to go on.
We're now going to move on to the zoning bylaws. And Rob Crowner is going to introduce Articles 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35 in 15 minutes.
I'm Rob Crowner. I'm with the Planning Board and the Zoning Subcommittee. We have, as Melissa said, we have 6 articles. A couple of them should be reasonably easy, but there's a few that are more complicated, but also not as difficult as ones we've had in the past. At least I don't think so. Sorry. So I'll start Article 30. Article 30 resolves an inadvertent conflict created in the fall town meeting when two conflicting conditions applying to the management of converted dwellings were passed. It deletes the broader one in favor of the more restrictive requirement of either owner occupancy or resident manager, which was the clear intent of town meeting. Articles 31, 32, and 35. This is our main work for the spring. These are motivated by our continuing effort to implement the master plan by focusing on village centers and by the housing production plan, which indicates significant shortfall in the housing supply across a range of demographics. We propose to address these issues in part, a small part, by making it possible for more housing to be created in Amherst, but directing it to centers in preference to neighborhoods, while at the same time encoding guidelines that tend to draw residents and businesses to locate in centers. So our strategy is to make what we think are incremental changes to our business zones, which we're now calling mixed-use zones, throughout town, loosening restrictions that speak to capacity and tightening some that speak to form and character. We've broken our package into 3 articles to make them more easily digestible, as town meeting has indicated it wants, but we hope you will see them as constituent parts of one whole. Article 31 raises the threshold at which a special permit is required for residential use in a mixed-use building in the commercial and limited business zones. That is, it allows more under site plan review, but not necessarily more overall. It also, for the first time, would allow a limited number of units on the ground floor of such buildings, but only in the rear, and in most cases, not more than around 25% of the floor space. Article 32 adjusts the dimensional table for some of our mixed-use zones to both allow more flexibility in the development or evolution of properties there, and to introduce elements of what we have previously called form-based design regulations into the existing fabric of the zoning bylaw. Most notably, it removes the lot size standards for mixed-use buildings, replaces minimum front setback maximums with a minimum maximum range, or minimum front setback with a minimum maximum range, and maximum building heights with a minimum maximum range, and adds 1 floor to the maximum in the downtown. It also changes how we measure the height of a building in an attempt to encourage the use of pitched roofs instead of flat roofs. Article 35 adds a new section to the chapter of the zoning bylaw that deals with non-conforming properties in mixed-use zones, requiring that additions or expansions to these should take place within the front setback range that we've established in Article 32, regardless of where the existing building is located on the lot. Article 33 is an attempt to rationalize the permitting of non-conforming properties in business zones so that unnecessary or duplicate hearings need not be held, and so that non-conforming properties in business zones are treated similarly to the way non-conforming properties in residential zones are treated. And Article 34 changes the dimensional table in the RF zone to allow more flexibility in the interpretation of a few of the dimensions there, because we have 2 RF zones. We have 2 places where RF exists, and they're very different in character, and we want to allow for the possibility of more dense development in one of them than is possible under the current dimensional table. So that's the 5-minute version of 6 articles, and we have lots of time for questions. No questions.
Oh, they will be. Well, maybe I predicted wrong. Carol.
If there aren't more questions and there's extra time, I would just ask for a lengthier explanation on every article, because it was so quick, I didn't really grasp what it was saying. Just taking the last one, density. You said it would allow greater density. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Sure.
But with each of them, I'd love at least 3 or 4 sentences instead of 1.
Yeah, I was asked to do a quick summary. So for the RFZO, what we're proposing is adding.
Article 34, page 25 in the warrant.
Oh, I'm sorry. The fraternity residence zone. RF is our fraternity residence zone. It exists on Olympia Drive, and there are 3 properties on North Pleasant Street, right in the heart of the university, the Newman Center, and the 2 fraternities north of that. So those are 2 very different places. But there's one dimensional table for them, one set of dimensional regulations. What we're proposing to do is add footnote A to 3 of those lines there, building coverage, lot coverage, and height, I believe. And that allows the special permit granting body, who's hearing a special permit for a proposal in one of those areas, to modify the dimensional table in conformance with the surrounding neighborhood. Surrounding neighborhood on North Pleasant Street is UMass. It has multi-story buildings, larger lot coverage, a different style of building. Olympia Drive is wooded and more sparsely populated. You would expect a less dense development there. However, the dimensional table really is only takes into consideration Olympia Drive, and so we wanted to be able to take into consideration UMass as well.
Janet?
I've got a few questions, and it is a complex article, so if I could just kind of say that they have to do with, if you could, for us, tell us what's affected, and if you could tell us also how the 3 main pieces, as I see them, work together. So that's the mixed-use buildings and standards that make it possible to have more units in a building, and tell me whether or not when I think it doubles that I'm right by saying 6 units now allowed on the upper floor, it goes to 10, and the first floor could be a few, say 2 or 3, so that brings a total where it was 6 to 12 or 13, so it at least doubles or more. And let's stop there for a minute because it is complicated and I've got more for you.
And that is Article 31, page 19, is that
No,
what
it's
you're-
the whole package.
Okay.
It's a pretty complex package and it's meant to work together.
Right.
So I'd like to really get into where and what will it do.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's the business zones are the red spots on the map. There's different kinds. There's the commercial zone. There's a limited business. There's general business, which is the downtown. There's business village centers in some of the areas. So the commercial zones are up at the top, and then off on the east here. That's the one that most people are worried about. There's some business village center also in the eastern part and up in the northern part. The general business is right in the middle with some limited business around it, and there's business village center and neighborhood business in between there on the train tracks. Over here on University Drive is limited business. So the articles that we're proposing are intended to affect all of the areas, all of the red areas, and not any of the other colors, not the green, the yellow, or the gray. It is true that the greater impact will be on the commercial and limited business zones because it will affect the residential use in those areas. In those areas, the only residential use is allowed in a mixed-use building. And so what we're proposing to do is change the standards and conditions for mixed-use buildings to allow more residence use in those buildings in those areas. But it will affect mixed-use buildings in all of the areas. And the way it affects is it changes the threshold at which a special permit is required to put residences in those buildings. Right now, if you want to put more than 6 or more than 6,000 square feet or more than twice as much as the ground floor commercial area, you need a special permit. However, the number of units is also governed by the lot size. It's governed by the size of the building. And the size of the building is governed by the percentage of lot coverage. So all of these things impact how many units you can actually put in the building, regardless of whether it's a special permit or a site plan review. So in a very large building, you might be able to fit a lot of units because you have a large lot, you have a lot of floor space that can have additional units above it. But the lot coverage requirements limit the number of units that you can put in that building. We're proposing that for a building like that to allow more units by right because they fit there. A smaller building or a smaller lot might only have room or permit for 3 or 4 units. And that won't be affected by the change in the standard conditions. It won't be affected. The effect will come when you take away the lot size requirement to allow more units to take place on a smaller lot. You're still going to be restrained by the size of the building. If you have a 20,000 square foot commercial space, that's a lot of commercial space to take up. I imagine, I'm not a realtor, but I imagine that it's easier to fill a 3,000 square foot building, 2,500 square foot building. On those kinds of buildings, you're not going to have 25 units above those. You can't, unless you have 400 square foot apartments, and that only fits one person maybe. So the idea that we can count how many units or how many people or how many bedrooms, it's really difficult to know exactly how many more people or more units, more bedrooms we're going to have because, for instance, if you have a building that allows you to have 3,000 square feet of living space, but the lot size limits you to 2 units, that's 2 1,500 square foot units. But if the lot size were taken away, you could divide that up into 6 units perhaps of 500 square feet apiece. So we haven't added any more living space, but we've added units. That's the purpose of this.
Okay, thank you. Janet, is there anyone else who's going to have a question too? I want to get some handle on how many questions are coming. Okay, all right, so Janet, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm most interested, of course, in North Amherst. And it has a large commercial zone. I figure it's about 50 acres or so. And down so we can see what North Amherst looks like. Can we bring that visual down? We're still not there yet. There it is. And these have been described as incremental changes, and I quite agree with you that it's heavy going if you try to figure out the units, let alone the number of occupants that could come up with. But it's possible to just do a simple calculation and see that if you cut the minimum lot size from 20,000 square feet to 15,000, that seems to me you've made a 25% reduction in the amount of lot you need, that it's a 38% reduction in the extra lot area for every family. Let me turn the page. and quite a hefty cutback in the frontage, how narrow or wide the lot would be. It gets to be quite skinny, going from 125 feet to 60 feet. And the minimum setback, I actually concur that where you're going with that makes a lot of sense. Also the range. And then you've got higher buildings on these little lots, 13% higher buildings on lots that are variously have been made smaller in many ways. Have I got that right? Does that sound in the ballpark?
I don't know. I'm not going to dispute any of your calculations. What I'm going to say is that, as I said before, reducing lot size to add more units doesn't necessarily mean that you're adding the same percentage of units that you're taking away in lot size. I don't think that's accurate to say.
Okay. Okay, and we have a couple of other questions. Carol, then Maureen, then Mr. Tucker. Oh, you have if you can make it really fast.
The proposal under Article 32 is not to go from, say, for instance, 15,000 square feet to 12,000 square feet in terms of lot size for all residential uses. There is also a footnote changing, which is described in the Planning Board report, and what you end up with is the same regulation that you have in the general residence district downtown and in the village center residence districts all throughout the town, whereby those minimum lot areas only end up applying anymore to converted dwellings and subdividable dwellings, existing buildings that are being converted into more units, or new buildings that are not going to exceed 3 units. Otherwise, they would not apply at all to other residential uses that would be permitted in any of those districts. Again, as Mr. Crowner said earlier, different districts allow different residential uses. In the commercial district, only mixed-use buildings are allowed as a residential use. So they are the only use that would be available through which to create residential activity. Given that there are so many other uses available in that zoning districts, there's a fair amount of competition for what land would be used for, which is one of the reasons why it's very difficult to say with any surety what the impact would be in terms of increased residential use, except that it would be considerably less than it would be in other zoning districts where residence-only uses are allowed, like apartments, townhouses, and so forth.
Okay, Carol, if you'd ask your question quickly and then deliver the mic.
My question has 2 parts. One is, are any of the proposed zoning changes being requested by a particular property owner or developer? And is there any particular development or project that will be, that we already have some knowledge about, that is going to be allowed with these zoning changes that is not currently allowed?
Not to my knowledge. We received no requests from a developer, and as far as I know, no project will be enabled. What will be enabled is more units on envisioned mixed-use buildings in North Amherst. We know that somebody wants to develop commercial use up there. Under the current regulations, you can't put as much residential units, not floor space, whatever, units on those buildings. And so it will enable more units, not necessarily more space.
Okay, and Marianne?
We've raised these issues, as you know, in zoning subcommittee and planning board and at other places. As the current articles are linked, it makes it very difficult for many of us to vote for something that we want to support. Everything on this map makes sense except for North Amherst. We know that North Amherst is still largely rural. We know that there are transportation and driveway and street issues. We know that there are real concerns about the appropriate placement of dense housing in Amherst. These are all things that were contested in the fall town meeting and have not been articulated or fully vented yet. So to put North Amherst there as a large red blob with the other red areas that we all agree make very good sense for commercial development and do no harm to local neighborhoods is, I continue to believe, a real error of judgment. I understand that the answer has been that you have to do all commercials at the same time. I find that hard to believe in the world of footnotes, not to be able to do an exclusion or an amendment. Thank you very much.
It's not really a question, but so you couldn't separate the commercial one from another unless you created a new zone or a new overlay or something. And I respectfully disagree with you on the appropriateness of doing this kind of small change to North Amherst.
Thank you, Rob.
That's it?
Yeah, we're moving on.
Next, we have the rezoning of Main and Gray Street parcels. Jared Guerra.
Article 36 just seeks to rezone 2 building lots at the corner of Gray and Main to business neighborhood from residential general. These are the 2 lots that are in front of the old Boys and Girls Club, the Henry Hills Mansion. We own the lots. We bought them from Barry Roberts in '08. We relocated the houses that are existing on Gray Street now. And the objective is to rezone these 2 building lots in order to facilitate the transfer and the erection of a new headquarters for Amherst Media. I think the best explanation of this is in the report from the planning board, which outlines pretty much our reasoning for it. We think it's the right use for that area. And I think we have the general support of the neighborhood in that, given the project that we've done there. And the fact that Amherst Media needs a new headquarters. So that's pretty much the summary.
Mr. Oldham, Jim? Oh. the delivery method has gotten...
Sorry, I forgot.
So I think that the plan makes perfect sense if it ends up in the hands of Amherst Media, but what assurance does town meeting have that that deal couldn't fall through, one or the other party could separate, and then we could get perhaps 2 separate buildings on those 2 lots rather than the plan that Amherst Media has, perhaps 2 commercial buildings. Is there any, if we pass this, is there any protection? And
there's no assurance. But what it is right now is that it's zoned for 2 residential building lots. And the idea is that by changing it to a business neighborhood rezoning, that it would encourage the kind of building that we want there rather than a residential buildings. We got an offer early on when we first bought the property to build residential properties there, 2 residential houses. And we turned it down because we didn't think it was the appropriate use there. Maybe we should have taken the money, but I think that it took us about 5 years to find the right partner for this project. We think Amherst Media is the right partner for the project. What it looks like and the design and the situation of the building will all be left to the newly created local historic district. So they will get a chance to say what it looks like. This doesn't address that. This is just simply for the zoning.
Any other questions? Carol?
So, it's my understanding these are the same 2 lots that the town was trying to buy a couple of years ago to preserve that historic lawn that's right next to the Women's Center. And have there been any further negotiations with the town to try to preserve that historic land? And does the historic district do anything to try to save that frontage, which was part of the historic character of that whole area?
No.
question in the back? Catherine, is your hand up? No, sorry. Any other questions? Okay, I think we can move on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, I'd like to ask Tracy Lee Boutillier to come petition article number 43. I'm sorry, it's number 42. My finger slipped.
You might speak right now.
While Tracy Lee's getting ready, I just want to remind people that we have evaluation forms in the back that we really hope you will fill out, that your responses do help us in planning future events. So if you would please do that and then leave it on the back table before you leave. Thank you. If anyone needs a form, just raise your hand and I'll come around and give it to you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name
Speak
is
right into the mic.
My name is Tracy Lee Boutillier, and I'm here representing the Echo Village Tenants Organization. We submitted Article 42, is that correct on the number on that, to come before town meeting, requesting that, what is this word? That the town will vote to acquire Echo Village properties. The wording on the article that we submitted should be amended, and I wrote up a little proposal explanation that the $3 million of the total that we were asking for is actually incorrect. We've readjusted, we're taking into consideration the total price. The approximation that we were able to come up with is $2.5 million, not $3 million. Of that, 15% is what we're asking from the town. We're asking that 85% come from other sources of funding. Examples of that being the low-income housing tax credit, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund could be another option, as well as home funds, which are through CDBG. Also appears to be a viable option as well. I just wanted to speak very quickly about the property. Our community is diverse, and we are diverse in many areas, racially, as well as the types of families that are there. We have a single dad raising his kids. We have a grandmother who's over 70 raising her children and her grandchildren. We have single moms who are head of households. We have a few families that are traditional in the sense that they're married. We have a handicapped household. The property, I believe, is very valuable to the town in that it has 7 4-bedroom units, one of those 4 bedrooms being the handicap accessible unit that is currently in use by a family. We have 7 3-bedroom units as well, and 10 2-bedrooms. With property such a big issue this year at town meeting, acquiring this property would prevent having to create new construction. It's reuse of a building, which I think is very sustainable. And it's in prime location. We would really like to not have to be displaced. Also, our issue directly benefits the CDBG count. If you're looking at CDBG is based off of a formula that considers low and moderate income population in town, measures of distress, including the extent of poverty and community need. That is what low and moderate income families, you know, we fall into that. And being Section 8 voucher holders, you know, it's important to have mixed communities, diverse communities. And also with the 40B, if this property is acquired on deed restriction, we would then be considered in that count, and our units would make up part of that 10% or help us get to the 10% that we would want to be in.
Could I clarify for you what 40B is? It's a state law that indicates if we fall below 10% affordable housing units, that a developer can come in and override all of our zoning laws that we spend all this time creating and voting on, and then build whatever type of unit they would choose to build.
Correct, I do understand that. By acquiring, oh, sorry, explain with me. By using the public funds that I've mentioned and that I've put in the write-up, we would accept the restrictions that come with that, which would then make us countable. It would be a deed restriction of affordability over a period of time. That restriction is what would make us count in the 10% that Amherst would like to keep. So.
Any questions? Connie? And then in the front.
You don't have to run. And thank you for that information. My questions really have to do with the mechanics, and I'm trying to understand where you're going to amend the article to 2.5 million from the 3, and yet the transaction price in the newspaper, which doesn't tell me everything, but is higher than even the 3. So I'm wondering how you got to the 2.5, and then I'm just wondering, I'll just combine my other question, the mechanism. So this is authorizing an eminent domain taking, and then you're projecting some likely funding sources. So would the town exercise eminent domain, and then like when does the 15% from the town come in vis-a-vis the other funding? So is it conditional, the town's money in, conditional on getting a viable funding package from the funding sources, and when does the taking happen?
Okay. If I can take that first part, the information that I was able to find, and as I believe the purchase was reported, was even 3 million. So if it was my error that it was over that, I apologize, that's my error. There were 2 buildings that were purchased at the same time in one transaction. We are trying to separate those out, and so it's an approximation that it's 2.5 million. And so from that side, because we're not looking at the other building, which is an office building, that's where we're coming with those figures. In terms of if this is based on whether, I'm trying to remember the way the question was, how the deal goes through and what happens first. While all of this is going on and waiting for town meeting, as representative of the organization, the tenants organization, I have been doing a lot of research and reaching out to different nonprofit agencies. The sense that I'm getting is that our scenario, so to speak, is attractive to a developer. We're smaller than what most developers look at. The fact that we fit into sustainable categories, and it's reuse of a building. Most importantly, it is preservation of much needed affordable housing. We're in an area of low poverty, so this mixed income area is prime. It works for communities, it works for families, it works with children, giving them something to see and reach higher and aspire higher. So, I mean, overall, socially, economically, it works. And I think that it fits in with the spirit of Amherst and who we are. Am I missing something on the
I'm
on the
concerned
question
about time here, and I know there's a couple of questions. Is it Dan? Okay, and then, oh Jesus, some more. I don't know what you want to do. You want to go later? Okay, if you can make a very quick question and a quick response.
Yes, I just wanted to know if the possibility of future costs to the town have been considered. Specifically, I'm thinking about additional services, like say a bus route that would take residents of Echo Hill directly to Hadley Mall, where vital services are provided, you know, grocery stores, for instance, as well as the potential for rezoning in the area that would spur development conducive to the kinds of services affordable housing requires. So,
Really quickly, just a correction, we're Echo Village, the beginning of Echo Hill. So Echo Hill as a whole, but it's Echo Village. We're zoned, so the property is already standing. We are steps away from a bus stop. We have there's medical facilities just up the street. We are in, I don't know if that's in East Amherst Village area. We're near a village center, I believe. So we are pretty much in a great spot.
Well, the bus
We're
is
on a bus
regular,
route already, so. The center of town and then catching a different bus. Depending on the timing, my son took that route going to work when he worked at McDonald's, and he'll probably be doing that again this summer. It's not unreasonable at this point. We're not looking for any extra services coming in and having those changes. Again, you know, we're prime in location.
All right, Jim, and the
I just wanted to clarify part of the answer to Connie's earlier question. I think it's clear in the article that the 15% would be subject to receipt of grants, and we do this all the time. Whether it's if we approve the 15% would only be spent if the town could then receive these other grants. So I think that's pretty clear in the article. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, and sorry for
Okay, we'll
not
need to
getting
go
that,
on.
Connie, I apologize.
Tracy, could you stay in case there are questions at the end?
Absolutely, I'd be more than happy
'Cause
to
there are
answer
some
any
people
questions
with
I
their
can.
hands up. Melissa, you gonna go on?
Thank you.
Now moving on to the Coles Land Conservation Purchase, Article 43, and Jack Hirsch is going to speak for that petition article.
Good evening. We would like the town to consider purchasing the conservation rights of a plot of land in North Amherst, which has been on the town open space and recreation plan for, I think, 7 years, and is a targeted plot that the town has looked at for buying the conservation rights for. There was never any urgency to the issue, and it is now in Chapter 61, so it was deprioritized, I believe. And at this point, for various reasons, don't necessarily apply here, but we feel a sense of urgency. We were in a difficult situation because we don't know really what the value of the land is. We compared it to the Brushy Mountain deal in Shutesbury, which was worked out to about $1,000 an acre. This is 155 acres, and we roughly calculated that it was worth 2 or 3 times that. So we came up with a figure that was up to $1.2 million. We were also looking into granting agencies and doing fundraising and that sort of thing. So obviously it's the same situation that Tracy Lee just mentioned. It wouldn't come to pass unless we raise the appropriate money. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the land. To quote the Open Space and Recreation Plan, it's the Cushman Forest Reserve. It's located east of Henry Street in North Amherst. It contains the largest unfragmented block of forest land in Amherst, known primarily for the migration of mole salamanders through the tunnels installed for their safe passage under Henry Street. This is one of the unique features of Amherst, which actually has made us famous. The Mill River below Puffer's Pond and the Cushman Brook above form the core of an extensive greenway in North Amherst, stretching from Leverett to Hadley. Both contain above average water quality and are known for their recreation value to Amherst residents and visitors alike. This corridor is significant to many nesting bird species as well as a number of mammals, including moose, turkey, deer, and bear. The upper watershed of the Cushman Brook provides water to Atkins Reservoir. You can see the land is where the cursor is, and actually the previous zoning map showed the animal corridor better than this one, but it's basically across Market Hill Road. And I guarantee you the animals don't obey traffic signs. They walk across the road and go into this plot of land, and many of us have had encounters with them in our backyards and stuff. So basically, I would just like to say that acquiring the conservation issues is something that's consistent with the master plan that we've all exhaustively produced. It is mentioned in the open space and recreation plan. It emphasizes the intent to increase connectivity of conservation and recreation land so that pedestrians can access these areas without driving. And there are lots of homes around this. It's very accessible. Many people use it. It also has the Robert Frost Trail growing through it, so that connects it with Amethyst Brook, which has very similar passive recreation uses to our land, and it connects it to the Puffer Pond area. So without this block of land, with the nameless proposed development, this will be disconnected. So we're proposing one of the goals of the open space and recreation plan, and that is to develop partnerships with organizations to protect, manage, and promote the town's natural attractions that are the basis for tourism and cultural economy. And we feel that through working with land trusts and granting agencies, and we made a presentation to the Community Preservation Act Committee, which was very favorably received, that we would like to consider purchasing the conservation rights for this land.
Any questions? David.
That's a bad question. Basically, this is the awkward part of it. Right now the land is in Chapter 61, so the town gets the right of first refusal when it comes out of Chapter 61. The owner submitted a buy-sell agreement, which was rejected by town council. So there is no buy-sell agreement which would set fair market value. The rumors are that it's up to $6.6 million, but until we see something, we don't know what it is. So I'm being very honest.
Anyone else? Vince?
So, one, are you seeking funds this year from this year's Community Preservation Act sources? And could you explain the scenario whereby, I guess you're in the same situation as the previous speaker, the speaker for the previous article, Article 42, where you're both seeking funds and the Community Preservation Act recommendations have already been made. What is your process? How are you approaching the Community Preservation Act Committee, and what are you going to, what are you asking from them? You asking that they drop one of their projects?
No.
That they fund it differently? Would your project be funded by bonding?
Well, we propose that if they do float a bond, that we be included with that, and that would prorate the cost of floating the bond and therefore be more affordable. but we didn't get any assurances that that would happen. And apparently it's past the funding cycle, so they encouraged us to come back at the next funding cycle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. But we're kind of over time, so if you could.
Thank you.
Our last article is Article 44, the non-citizen voting rights, Vladimir Morales. Not here? He's not here. He's not here.
Actually, that article is one that we have passed, I think, at least twice, 3 or 4 times maybe. And it's at the state level where it is held from happening. So this is another attempt to allow for voting rights locally for non-resident aliens. Okay. So this has been a very quick run through, and I hope what it means is that you all coming to town meeting will realize that there's a lot of material to go through. We'd like to thank everyone who came tonight to present articles, and for those of you that are here to ask questions, and we hope people watching at home either now or in replays or on demand will get a start at least on the issues before town meeting. The town meeting coordinating committee invites all members of town meeting to come on the bus tour, which is going to be on Sunday, April 28th from 2 to 4. We leave from the middle school parking lot, and it's really important to be there at 1:45 because the bus is often gone at 2. We also are having precinct meetings beginning on Thursday the 23rd, Tuesday the 25th.
Thursday the 25th.
The 25th. Another one on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, May 4th. These are all very good places for informal discussion with your neighbors to go over things that perhaps discussion will help you on. Let's see, we're going to have an orientation for new town meeting members on the first night of town meeting. Those who are coming to town meeting new will really benefit, I think, from this short meeting. It'll be from 6 until 6:45 because you have to get over to town meeting in the middle school, other end of it sort of, at 7 o'clock it begins. There will be signs up to the home ec room where we're going to meet, so that any door you come into the middle school, it will direct you to the home ec room. And those coming will receive copies of 2 very helpful League of Women Voters publications. One is Your Amherst Government, and the other one is the Town Meeting Handbook, which is really, really very good to have. We want to be sure that you make use of the town website, and that's simply www.amherstma.gov/TM, or town meeting.
That's for the town meeting page.
Yeah, and there's an update of material all the time. We try to post everything that goes into the packet and material that is given to us. Please be sure to leave your evaluation forms because we like to learn from each meeting we have to help planning next meetings.
And thank you to Amherst Media. How would we ever do without you? Check Channel 17 for meetings of committees and boards, which may help you a lot on learning what is coming up for town meeting. So thank you, everybody. Good night.